So now that I know, as I'm learning, I should say, the greatness within me historically, you can't stop me no more. Nothing can stop me. And when I finish, I'm not the person that started. Because for the first time in my life, I see black manhood, not black males. I say thank God every day that I had that experience. Because if I didn't have that experience, meaning that high school experience, being in that white school, if I didn't have that experience, I wouldn't have evolved into the educator that I became, because I wouldn't have had that foundation.
I heard money don't grow on trees, but I still believe I can achieve. Cause cash rules everything around me, around me, around me, around me. Money don't grow on trees, but I still believe.
Welcome to another episode of the Black Money Tree Podcast. Today, I'm really excited because we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's education. And specifically, the role that education plays in terms of building the economics of underserved communities. And we have a true living legend here with us today, a true champion for education. He's changed and transformed the lives of thousands of youth from across the country, and he's now on a mission. And he's empowering other educators and teaching and training them how to reach children, specifically in underserved communities. I'm really interested to hear his story. I may mess his name up, but please welcome to the Black Money Tree Podcast, Mr. Dr. Baruti Kafele. Baruti.
There you go.
Okay, Baruti Kafele. Thank you so much for joining us on the Black Money Tree Podcast.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Let's jump right in. And for those that don't know, I'd heard of you. Once we brought you to the Black Expo, I began to research you and study your readings and things of that nature. And I said, man, where has this guy been all of my life? So for those that aren't familiar with you, I want you to take a moment to talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your path in becoming who you are now in terms of education.
All right, well, let's start with the path.
Okay.
I'm a high school dropout. Drop back in there, but invisible, not doing anything. So, just dealing with challenges in life, trauma, if you will, and eventually graduated in 5 years after having attended 4 different high schools in Jersey, which is my home. For the next 5 years, I just spent my time doing nothing. That's 10 years wasted. So I decided to go to college. And I went to satisfy my mother, fulfill her dreams. So I didn't have an ambition, no goal, no dream, no nothing, no purpose, no mission, no vision, nothing that I wanted to study. So I asked her, what should I study? And she said, marketing. What is that? Business, sales. Okay. So I studied marketing. I graduated summa cum laude. And I haven't looked back. But I knew somewhere within the major, this wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, but I'm gonna go ahead and go hard in the academic portion and graduate. I knew I wanted to teach, but I didn't want to start over. So I went in through the back door, so to speak, and went on and started teaching in Brooklyn, New York City. Loved it. Went back home to Jersey, to the city that I was born and raised, East Orange, which is right next to Newark. And taught and became teacher of the year after 4 years of teaching. I was the building level teacher of the year, the district teacher of the year, the county teacher of the year, and New Jersey State finalist. I went hard and I loved it. So soon after, did 7 years of teaching, I went on and became a principal. And same thing, I just took whatever it was we were doing in the classroom and transferred it to the building level as a principal, but now it's not me doing the teaching directly, it's me training staff to be able to do that which I did as a teacher.
Yeah.
Did that for 14 years, and then went on and doing the work I'm doing now, which is national consulting.
So you kind of gloss over something that I need to go back to. Mm-hmm. How do you go from graduating in 5 years, so I assume you weren't a very good student,
right,
to graduating college summa cum laude? Tell me how that transition
went.
Sure,
all right. I was going to try to keep it short and not tell you that, but we can go into it. I stumbled on a book the first day I got there. I was in the library. I never read a book in my life. I knew how to read though.
Wow.
I was 23 years old. So I go to the library because I figured since I'm trying to get my life right, the library would be the place to be. So I go to the library and I started walking the aisles where the books were, aimlessly, just walking. Left side of my brain saying, grab a book. Right side of my brain saying, but you don't read. So I'm just walking, and I see a book that somebody didn't push in all the way. So it's sticking out a little bit. I don't know what it is, but because that book wasn't pushed in all the way, I grabbed it. True story.
Wow.
I didn't even look at the cover because I wasn't interested in reading. I went to a seat, and then as I sat down, I looked at the cover, the title, and this is in 1984, To Kill a Black Man. Subtitle, The Parallels of the Lives of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. I don't know them. I know that Dr. King was born, and I knew he did something around civil rights, but I can't talk intelligently about him yet. I know Malcolm was born, but I can't give you nothing. So I read the first page and I say, I go on and read the second page. I go on and read several pages, and as I turn each page, I say, what? So now I go to class because it's time to go, but I race back to the library and I stay in there till about midnight reading this book. I take it out, they threw me out, so I borrowed it. I finished it in about 2 days, it's about 200 some odd pages. And when I finished, I'm not the person that started. Because for the first time in my life, I see black manhood, not black males. See, so now I'm so intrigued. I want to know everything possible about these two men. So somebody turned me on to a bookstore up in Harlem called Liberation Bookstore at the time on Malcolm X Boulevard, which at the time was Lenox Avenue. And I just wiped their shelves clean of everything on Dr. King, everything on Malcolm. I became a Malcolm King walking encyclopedia. You couldn't ask me nothing about these two men that I couldn't give you detailed answers, right? From there, I wanted to know everything they knew. If Malcolm knew it, I want to know it. If Dr. King knew it, I want to know it. So, but particularly around African-American history and the African diaspora. So I'm reading everything I can get my hands on related to history, but simultaneously going to your question, I'm in school. I'm in the university, Kane University in New Jersey. Well, that work is easy now because for the first time in my life, I have a sense of history. I have a historical, cultural foundation to stand upon. So now that I know, as I'm learning, I should say, the greatness within me historically, you can't stop me no more. Nothing can stop me, right? If I conceptualize it, it's mine because I understand the shoulders upon which I stand. So academic coursework in the school, that's nothing for me. So I'm straight A's, right? So I'm studying, but so I can get back to these books I'm reading. So I built this whole library of just history. And that's why I wanted to teach.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to take that information I had, not knowing, sort of knowing, but not knowing that I'm not going to be able to share this in a classroom, right? Not what I know. But since I'm so ignorant to a school system, because I'm not studying education, I go in there. Think about it. All I know in life is marketing and history. I don't know anything else. I don't know high school curriculum. I barely know middle school curriculum. And now I'm a 5th grade teacher. So I'm gonna figure out this math, but I'm going to infuse this history into the math. Now, of course, now that's a thing called culturally relevant pedagogy. But at the time, I don't know that. I just know, all I know is history. I can learn this 5th grade math and let me make this math relevant to these students so they see themselves in the learning, right? Science, language arts, social studies, the same thing. We're outperforming everybody. So then I love it. I said, well, let me go back to East Orange, to Jersey, and do the same thing. And hence why they named me Teacher of the Year, because we outperforming everybody. So the question becomes, how? Like, what are you doing that's so different from anybody else? Because you're teaching content. I'm teaching children. There's a difference. And in teaching children, I'm putting the children on the page. I'm putting the children in the lesson so they see themselves in the learning, and now the learning becomes relevant, and I can take them and I can mold them and shape them into anything, whatever it is that they desire, that they want to become. I got that kind of influence.
Let me ask you this. The thought, you were a bad high school student,
Right.
excellent college student. Was your lack of performance in high school just lack of effort? And then I would say your transformation in college, was it more you felt like you needed to represent because you knew who you were and you felt like you were letting down your culture, your legacy? Tell me a little bit about that.
It's none of that.
Okay.
Like, and I'll say this boldly, and I'll speak for myself, but like many of us, particularly during that time, I felt dumb. I'm gonna use that for now.
In high school,
Yeah,
of course.
I
Okay.
felt like, yeah. I went to 4 different high schools. The first 3 were all black. My mom said, this ain't working. We going somewhere where there ain't no black people. All right, Mom, let's go. So we go down the New Jersey Turnpike to this town called Woodbridge. 2,000 students in the school. I make African American number 5, but the 4 who were there were born there, so they were embedded in the culture, so it's like they were white, culturally speaking.
Yeah.
So it's a culture shock for me, but in terms of my demeanor, it was a culture shock for them. I happened to play basketball back in them days and ran track. So because I was good, they said, okay, you failing everything, but you know how to put that ball through the hoop, so we got you. As a long jumper, I'm jumping 22 feet. That's the same distance as Carl Lewis in the same year. Oh, we got you, right? So I'm looking at kids academically, my white peers. I'm like, I ain't got what they got. I can't do what they do. I'm dumb, right? I'm a black kid from East Orange. I can't do what they do because I didn't know better. I didn't have that sense of history. So to fast forward, no, I wasn't repping our people when I came into that knowledge. I was just intrigued by what I was learning. And it said to me internally, yo, you part of this legacy. This is what you are. How dare you squander your education? How dare you look at somebody else, whether they look like you or not, and feel inferior to them when you're not? And that's how it went. But I'll say this to you. I say thank God every day that I had that experience. Because if I didn't have that experience, meaning that high school experience, being in that white school, if I didn't have that experience, I wouldn't have evolved into the educator that I became, because I wouldn't have had that foundation. I may have just gone into a school if I became an educator, which I doubt, but let's say I did. I probably would have been generic. Just, I'm a teacher. I teach subjects.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been rooted in a purpose, rooted in a struggle, rooted in a mission, rooted in a vision. Like my message to my kids every day as a teacher and a principal is we're striving to achieve the impossible. We're striving to achieve the inconceivable. Forget about benchmarks and goals. We're going beyond that. And they rock with me.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I've been studying, if you will, David Goggins lately.
Oh.
And I don't know if you ever read anything about David Goggins. I heard 2 things today. He talks about the governor, and he says how, cars, they have the governor. If you take that governor off, they'll go 300-400 miles an hour. But they put this governor on there that restricts its ability to perform. But how we have these internal governors in our mind. And then what you just said there was you teach your people to go beyond what they think they can do. And ultimately what he talks about is how, let's just say you're running, he runs. When you start running, you start feeling that pain. I'm ready to stop. I don't want to do it. That's the governor. But you got to push through that pain until it becomes somewhat normal and you get that second wind.
That's right.
And then you can go 10, 20 more miles.
That's right.
And but that's what I heard, and then I think that's
right.
powerful.
You're on point.
So let me ask you this straight up. Well, I'm gonna preface it with a statement. Maslow, you familiar with Maslow?
Absolutely.
Hierarchy of needs, physiological safety, actualization. To me, education kind of goes with actualization because you want to be educated so you can create wealth and so you can make a difference and make a change. The question is, what is the role of a teacher in your mind? Yeah. And I say that to say, well, let me let you answer it. Then I'll tell you why I say that. Go ahead. What is the role of a teacher?
At its core, first, for students to learn. Yeah. Right? Students are walking into the building to learn. So at its core, at its center, your role is to ensure that students are learning. But then we want to go beyond that. Yeah. Right? So learning what? And for what reason? Right? And what can I do with that? Because having worked with the volume of schools that I work with, working with the volume of administrators and teachers that I work with, and children, there's a lot of children in our classrooms in America who, if you ask them why they're here, they don't know. So they're here because they have to be there. But what am I supposed to be getting out of this, right? So I'm not worried about the content because my premise is that the children are born brilliant. But I have to be, but in terms of who knows that, it has to go beyond me. Has to go beyond us as the educators. I got to convince youngster, you're special. You're extraordinary. You're somebody. But what if I got teachers that don't understand that, right? Let me give you this example. This thing blew my mind. 2020, I'm a sports fan. I'm a basketball fan. The sports world shut down, so my release, my outlet was gone. So we got to watch old films on ESPN, right? So NBA decides we got to salvage the season, the bubble. Cool. So now we can watch basketball. But George Floyd is murdered, 9 minutes and 29 seconds. So now the players, many of them, want to be out with the rallies and the protests and the demonstrations and the marches and so forth. But if they leave, they got to be quarantined as we did back in them days. So they had to stay there and use the microphone. So you had the world out here, which we can call a bubble, and then you had the NBA players over here in their bubble. And the two bubbles, the only way they could intersect was through microphones. So I said, wait a minute. I'm an educator. I think I look at life through the lens of an educator always. I said, wait a minute. That's what we deal with in schools every day. You got Jalil and Jamila. Those are generic names I use for children when they're black, right? Doesn't mean that they're any category. Just Jalil and Jamila could be valedictorian, salutatorian. They could be at promise, right? Which I would say for instead of at risk. So you got Jalil and Jamila over here in their neighborhood. And here's the school over here. But then you got on the other side of the tracks, this young white girl, or a few of them, who are going through their elementary, middle, and high schools and ultimately go to college, and then a percentage of them want to go on and become teachers. So Jalil and Jamila are in a bubble over here in their neighborhood, and chances are all they know is that neighborhood in terms of what they know in life. I don't know life beyond this, right? I've seen it on TV, but I've never experienced it. But in terms of my experience, this is my world, this block I live on. Then you got these other children on the other side of the tracks, and their world may be a little bit more well-rounded because of privilege, but they're in a bubble that has nothing to do with this bubble. These bubbles are not intersecting. They may see one another in the supermarket, but chances are they won't because they're not going to the same supermarket. They may see each other at the sporting event. Chances are they won't because that kid may not be able to go to the sporting event. So those are the only opportunities, television, news, all that kind of stuff. So now this teacher says, I want to be a teacher. I want to teach. And I want to go into the urban school. I think I have something to offer, right? Some of them might say I got that, some of them might have that savior mentality, but I want to go into the urban school. So now the bubbles intersect for the first time in the lives of those teachers. Now I'm here with Jalil and Jamila. Principal Kafele goes and does workshops at those schools where that teacher works. And Principal Kafele has lunch with those teachers. Hey, teacher, let's talk. Yeah, let's talk. Talk to me about your intimate familiarity when you were growing up, even up to today, with black people. Not some passing, just passing someone on the street or at the game or the store, the mall, but your intimate familiarity with black people. And of course, some will have it. But of course, there are others that don't. That's the one I want to harp on right now. So she says to me, Principal Kafele, I don't have that. So teacher, what grade do you teach? I teach 3rd grade in this school we're in. All these little black kids in here. This is your first time, can I assume this is your first time having sustained relationship with black people? Well, I never thought about it that way, Principal Kafele. I'm quoting him. But yes. So through 3rd graders, this is your first time having sustained relationship with black people. Yeah. Well, guess what, teacher? You don't know black people. Not through a 3rd grader. So now how are you going to make those cultural connections with children you do not know? See, now if the mentality or the mindset is we teach content first and children secondarily, then the rationale would be, well, I teach math. What difference does it make? I teach science. What difference does it make? But nah, my mindset is you teach children, and you happen to teach language arts or math or science or social studies or whatever to them. But if you don't know them, if you don't identify with them, if they don't identify with you, if you don't relate to them or they don't relate to you, then what you're going to be doing all day long is this. Yeah. You're going to be missing them, and they're going to be missing you. And now you're not in position to have those real conversations. When we talk about economics and education, education and economic prosperity, you can't have that conversation because you don't understand it. Yeah. Or said differently, you don't know it. But my language is always understand, because you could know something but not understand the layers that it entails. So that's where I am with that. But I'm not saying that someone non-black can't be successful with black children. Yeah. No, never. I'm saying that person has to be willing to understand, unravel all the crap you got in you, and now let us remold you, rebuild you, reshape you, so that you're an asset and add value to the children in these particular schools. Well,
the way what I hear in that, you didn't say this, so tell me if this is correct. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of how a lot of the European missionaries go to Africa to evangelize. Yeah. And they come back teaching the kids more about wearing white shirts and black ties and washing their hands and this, that, and the other, but they can't quote the scriptures. Right. So they've taught them European culture, and then they associate their godliness with their ability to conform to European culture. Yeah. You know, that ain't what you said, but that's kind of what.
That's where it is.
Yeah. So let's go back to the original question. What is the role of a teacher? You said to educate, to teach. But the reason I prefaced it with the Maslow is when you're in underserved communities where kids don't have enough food to eat, they're hearing gunshots at night, and they're dealing with those base level physiological security needs, and then they come into that environment to be taught. That's not their number one. Those needs build on one another. If you don't have your physiological, you don't have your safety, you're not really concerned about your social and actualization. So how then does a teacher navigate that environment? And part of the reason I heard one interview where you said when you was a teacher, everybody in the school, the teacher, everybody had your number. Yeah. And in my mind, I was like, I said, that's too much. Yeah. That's not your job. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But I guess the reality is, if you really want to teach them and they're dealing with issues, physiological safety, this, that, and you can't reach them unless you deal with that. So you have to, in inner cities, change the definition of what a teacher is. Yeah. Would you agree?
I would, but see, here's the thing in terms of the example you gave. I'm not putting that onus in terms of that youngster who's coming in hungry, who's coming in traumatized, etc. I'm not putting that onus on the teacher in isolation. That's now I'm looking at the building level. Now I'm looking at the district level. So let me not talk about the district in this example. Let me talk about the building. So here I'm leader of a school in the neighborhood you described. So what am I doing as leader to support my teachers? See, I got hungry children. So what am I doing as principal to ensure I don't have hungry children, right? I understand you may be hungry at home, but this is your other home. And I can't have you hungry in here, right? What am I doing to give you the kind of support you need emotionally with what you're dealing with in your life outside of school to ensure that this is an environment where I can feel comfortable, I can feel safe, I can be me, etc. I'll give you this example. The last school I led, which was a high school, by self-admission, this is not me doing any scientific study, survey, anything. This is just self-admission. My boys saying to me, I'm either Blood, Crip, Grape, Latin King, or MS-13. 95% of my boys self-identify, right, as being gangbangers, right? Just through conversation. All right, that's who I got in the school. All right. Well, if my teachers are going to connect with kids who in some cases are making more money on the street than they ever dreamed of making in short term, I can't expect that teacher to go in and be superstar unless I understand the dynamics of who this kid is. That's where I come in. Right? I got to educate my staff. I got to train my staff. I got to make them understand the environment upon which they live. So them same kids, I took over the school in 2005. We the lowest performing school in our district. 4 years later, we the flagship school of the district. We outperforming everybody. What's the proficiency? 100%, math and language arts. So what'd you do, Principal Kafele? I said, it's very simple. While you all were trying to raise test scores, which we call closing the achievement gap, I said we were closing a different gap called the attitude gap. The gap between those students who have the will to achieve excellence and those who do not. So I said, if I can get them excited about learning, excited about themselves, excited about the prospects for their future, we good. But I'm not the classroom teacher. That's the teacher. So that's where I come in as building leader, right? I gotta support my staff so that my staff can be proficient in the classroom with young people. So that's why I say it's for me, it's not a teacher question. It's a principal question, okay. and it becomes a teacher responsibility. But first, what am I doing? I'll say this even though the camera's roll. I don't know if you're on my social media. I wrote a 40,000 word book over the past 18 days. I just finished it yesterday. And it's called What is My Value to the Teachers That I Supervise Instructionally? So in other words, the whole premise is to say, and this is something I've been teaching for years, I just never wrote about it, is to say, if children are going to be successful, I as leader, along with my leadership team, administrative team, have to be instructional coaches, instructional leaders, not someone who's divorced or detached from what goes on in a school, like in an office, reading emails, leading meetings, whatever it is. I got to be that lead instructor, right? That instructional leader, that instructional coach that ensures that teachers have the skill sets, the wherewithal that they need in order to make those connections with children in the classroom. Yeah. So when folks ask the question, how y'all go from like scoring in the 20s to 100% proficiency, in large part because I was playing that role of instructional coach, instructional leader, giving the teachers the support that they need.
Yeah. No, that's powerful. It's clear that you have a passion and a vision, which ultimately, anything that you're gonna do and you want to do it well, you have to have a passion for it. Yeah. So, talk a little bit about the role of the educational system, the educational process in terms of the economics in underserved communities? Because ultimately, the question we just talked about really is an economic question. If there were resources in the house, there would be food in the house. If there were more resources in the house, the mother wouldn't be working 2 jobs, and overnight she would have more time to spend with the child. You know, how does education play in terms of in that role, in terms of the economics of an underserved community?
Let's say, for example, children go from pre-K to 12. They graduate, let's even say with honors, but I come out of there financially illiterate, right? So what am I going to do with all this knowledge I accumulated over the past 14 years, including pre-K and kindergarten? What am I going to do with that? I don't know how money works, right? Chances are I don't know entrepreneurship, right? So as principal, matter of fact, as teacher as well, but I'm going to talk about my role as principal. I said, my kids got to know these things. So I created something which with them 20 minutes I got tomorrow, I'm going to talk about a little bit. I created what was called the Young Men's Empowerment Program. I sold it on my superintendent by saying that I need something that's not one of them add-ons, them pull out a class, after school program, before program. I need something that's on the order of our algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and calculus, where we are talking to our boys about what it is to be a young man, right? And there's 5 strands. I'm only going to give you one in this context. They're posed as questions. What does it look like to be a young man in relationship to himself? His own personal growth and development, his own personal evolution into becoming a man. What does that look like? And when I think about the volume of black children, in this case, black boys, who go home to a household where dad is not present, right? Doesn't mean mom can't do an adequate job. But that masculine approach where that man is saying, but this is the difference between being a young man and a young male. This is what we do, right? My kids, most kids in America, they're not getting that message. So I said to my superintendent, I need to do something where he gets that message. And my young women, quite frankly, young women's empowerment, they get it as well in a separate room, right? So by grade level, for 4 hours on a Monday, we missing academics. We'll make it up. And I go out into the community and I recruit. I got hundreds of men. I can't even bring them all in because everybody wants to be there once the word is out. So one of the topics we're going to talk about is financial literacy and entrepreneurship. Because as I said to you yesterday, there's no conversation, and I'll stand on this. There's no conversation regarding education and economic prosperity in underserved communities if the children are not being exposed to the information.
Yeah.
It's a mute conversation. Yeah. Right? It's because the children in the pre-K children in 14 years are new adults, right? So therefore, we got to get them ready. The math class was dealing with numbers, but it may not be talking about financial literacy. Yeah. Like I'll talk to kids. I tell kids, I don't mind saying this with the camera rolling. On average, interest relative to my investments, I'm clearing over 6 figures every year, right? Just on interest. We ain't talking principal, just the interest alone. Well, young people need to understand how that works. Yeah. And they don't know that. So when I tell young people, yo, I made 6 figures while I was asleep, literally. People use that as cliche. It's literal, right? But if they're not being exposed to that, they think everything is hustle, 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 not knowing, no, it's really simple when you understand the principles. Yeah. And that's why I'm so adamant that there can be no discussion about economic prosperity if the children are not the core of the conversation. Yeah. Right? So, so that's...
It's interesting you say that. I know we said it off air. Yeah. The questions that were prepared, I ain't read none of them. I said, I talked to this brother. I said, we can talk. We have just launched. So the whole theme of this year's Texas Black Expo, education and economics. Why did we theme it that way? because we have a program, a curriculum that we've launched. I said, man, we got STEM schools, nursing schools, aviation schools. Where's the school on finance and entrepreneurship?
There it
So
is.
we created a program called FEW, Finance, Entrepreneurship, and Wealth Development. So the kids that you met out there, we got about 3 school districts now that are on board, and they let us in there. We taught the kids balance sheets, budgets, income statements, real estate investment. I taught them real life scenarios of houses I bought, how much I put it in there, how to calculate the return, real life stuff. And then they come here to Texas Black Expo and get behind the scenes. They see how one young lady said, I want to be in the production business. Well, go stand over there with my guy that's running the cameras and the sound. So they're getting a real life experience. And I think it's just the type of thing that, I don't know, when you look at it, one of the things that I told them in the class is I said, do you think that it's intentional? I showed them a video. It was called America's Dark Secret. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No.
And it talks about from slavery to where we are now. And after slavery was over and the wealthy whites had built their wealth, what was the first thing they did? Yale, Princeton, Harvard. They built these schools to teach and train their children how to manage and maintain the wealth. So one of the things I show them that video to say, they were strategically teaching their kids how to do you think it's a coincidence that it's not being taught in schools to you?
That's right.
So that's why we filled the gaps. Talk a little bit about that, the need for this type of program.
But see, like, just that comment alone, that last comment, those are the kind of conversations I was having as a teacher. And that's with 5th graders, that's babies, right? I'm not gonna shy away from that. And I'll say, like I talk to different educators, oh, Kafele, you don't understand the politics and all that kind of thing. Well, you gotta learn how to finesse it, right? But you can't have the aspiration before you get in that I know what they need, and then you get in and you don't give them what they need, right? You just gotta know how to finesse it while you're in there, how to maneuver so that you can give them what they want. But yeah, the when you talk about, you went back to enslavement and up into emancipation and then Jim Crow. And now you got a people who are trying to survive. One of the things in the context of what you just said is Black Wall Street in 1921, and that's a conversation which will never be exhausted, because you think about what they did, how they built it, right? Like I'll deviate from a topic with an audience and bring up a Black Wall Street, for example, if I have context for it, and I'll ask my audience. About Black Wall Street because of the summer of 2020. If it wasn't for that summer, then most of us wouldn't even know it existed. But because of the summer of 2020, it came out. So it became a thing with a lot of people. But I say to them, okay, tell me why it was created. What launched that? And most people don't know. Booker T. Washington, after Plessy versus Ferguson, launched a meeting and a summit, and he said, we've got to do something. And he brought in entrepreneurs and business people from all over the country. No internet, obviously, no phone. And they're there, and they said, we got to build. And they went back to their respective states. The contingent from Tulsa started building in 1906. And they kept building. And they kept building. But they built it not because somebody woke up in the morning and said, I want to be self-employed. They built it as a means of survival. So when I'm in these schools where they're so anti-equity and anti-DEI and all that other kind of stuff, I said, well, wait a minute. You're not even going to understand what DEI and equity is until you understand the history that got us to where we are. So when you start understanding this history, that whole argument about DEI, equity, and so forth will make sense to you. Right now, it doesn't make sense because you don't have historical context. So you give them that historical context. I can be at any conference where I'm the only Black person in the room and the only Black person in the city. But start talking history, and the folks don't even want me to get back on topic because they're being exposed to things that they've never heard of before. It's like, and I said, this is your history. This is American history. We never heard this, Kafele. All right, let me get back on point. No, don't. Give us some more of this history. They're curious. because they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't have reason to know because no one's ever taught them. So why, if I'm white or black and I went pre-K 12 and no one told me about Black Wall Street, for example, no one told me about Lewis Latimer. They made me think that these are all Thomas Edison. They never told me that Thomas Edison hired this young black man who was a product of two enslaved Africans who were captured up north and sent back to the South, but he stayed here and ultimately told Thomas Edison, I know what's wrong with that imperfect light bulb. Let me fix that for you. And put that carbon thread filament in it. And hence every light in this room is a Lewis Latimer bulb. But now that teacher sitting there, I ain't know this. I remember once, less than a year ago, I'm writing about Granville T. Woods. He created the third rail of the subway, New York City subway. And I put it on my thread and a guy blasted me. Why would you tell these lies? I said, it's documented. And there's a museum in Brooklyn called the New York City Subway Museum, and there's a whole exhibit there to Granville T. Woods. See, sometimes it's so overwhelming that people can't embrace it. But I'm always thinking, but what if the children realize it?
Yeah.
And they can see themselves differently. Like I say, I don't beat up on hip hop. I don't. But I do beat up on commercial hip hop that's destructive.
Yeah.
Right? And now that becomes the competition, right? I told you we had the Young Women's Empowerment Program. I got to show my young ladies that being a powerful black woman doesn't have to be the imagery you see in a commercial video. But if she's never heard that before, never been exposed to that, and that's not me doing that talking, by the way. That's the women I've brought in. Right? So that she can hear from someone who looks like her, but get a different perspective, right? Because if that's the competition and the media and social media being as powerful as it is, we can't win that unless we got people who have the spine to engage them in that conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Dr. Kafele, we could go on forever. I know we only got so much time, but I salute you for your work. I appreciate everything you're doing. I appreciate you joining us at Texas Black Expo.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything you want to tell the people about the new book, any consulting projects, anything you got that you want to share? This is your time to shine.
Where I'm at.
Right? Yeah, that one right there.
The only thing is, those who want to stay connected, I'm at principalkafele.com. And then you'll see all my social media. But my baby in this work, you know, I do a lot of different things in education as it relates to consulting and speaking, but my baby is the one thing I do that I don't get paid for. And that's my Saturday morning AP, standing for Assistant Principal, AP and New Principals Academy. I've done that every Saturday morning for the past 211 consecutive Saturdays. I haven't missed a Saturday. If I'm speaking on a Saturday, the client knows that I'm going to speak either before 10:55 or after 12:30, 1 o'clock. But nothing interferes with my AP and New Principals Academy. What that is, real quick, it's me using my platform to say to assistant principals and new principals that a lot of what you've learned is not going to cut the mustard in terms of being a leader in your school. Let me and my hundreds of guests talk to you about how to be effective leaders so that these children, these babies, can benefit. So that's what I do every Saturday morning at 10:55 on YouTube at AP and New Principals Academy.
There you have it, Baruti Kafele.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of the Black Money Tree Podcast.